and I would look for the non-promoter bottles because there's bottles, the cheap bottles that they give promoters. And then I could tell that, if they didn't have those bottles and they had like 1942 or Grey Goose or whatever else they were spending. And so I would go to those tables and I would just introduce myself. I'd be like, hey, that's my table over there. I'd point to a table with a bunch of girls at it. I'd be like, I just want to say hi. I work here with the hospitality company. If you need anything, just let me know. And so then I would give out my phone number. They would kind of see the table and then they'd be like, oh, so we would start having a conversation. But I ultimately realized at this point that even though there was an exchange of value, there was still nothing that I could really do for them, outside of the clubs. Like what's my value, right? And I was starting to think about, like, I go to UCLA, like, I'm very business minded, but they're looking at me as a promoter. And so I was like, well, how do I break out of just that perception based on whatever they're talking about? If there's just something I say I can offer them, even if it's a small offer, I'm going to be much more memorable because I'll be considered someone that can add value, right? And so that's how I got my first internship. My first job was from the clubs. I went around to like a table this one night and I met this guy who was partnered with Addison Rae's dad on a social media marketing agency. And they were helping Fortune 1000 companies with like TikTok content. So like short form content production. And I was like, yeah, I know tons of like college influencers and also work with the nightclub. So I know a lot of, I know how to build ambassador programs, and this was all BS, like whatever. But I just kind of angled it as like, there is something that I can provide to you. I started working in social media with zero experience and zero like prior intent. I was just, kind of like aimless. Like I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I was 19. Nightlife experience really came into play because then I had that internship. I went from that internship to a salaried role. And then I went from that company to starting my own agency.
Being broke is bad, but being stupid is what's really bad. And what's really, really bad is being broke and stupid.
Confucius says that you have two lives and the second one begins when you realize you only have one.
No one is paying attention.
It's not that hard, Scott. Tell him, Wash.
It's incredibly hard.
Hey, anything worth doing is.
Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to episode 5 of the Young, Smart, and Battling Broke podcast, where I talk to young people building wealth and meaning in creative ways. I'm Cole Hume. Today, I'm chatting with Sam Freeman, and my God, was it hard to get this dude on the calendar. He's absurdly busy building 2 businesses, both of which somehow make working look a lot like living. Sam got his start in club promotion at just 19, turned that into a lucrative marketing agency in his early 20s, and now he's behind an international house music event brand and community that's exploding across cities. Sam is sharp and extremely honest. His confidence might catch you off guard until you realize it's backed by thoughtfulness, humility, and a serious growth mindset. It's hard not to get amped after a conversation with him, and I think you'll see why. Let's shut me up and let's start this conversation.
Action.
Okay, after 25 rain checks, we have finally gotten Sam Freeman and I to have this conversation. Super, super excited to have you on the pod, brother. Gonna dive right into, you've been up to some shit, man. You've been busy. And I think that this is gonna be an interesting way to kind of pull apart or pull the thread of each interesting thing you're doing, is just kind of hearing what's been going on in like the last kind of couple weeks. What's been the big things on the calendar, and then we can kind of double click as needed on the different businesses that you've been working on.
Well, okay, actually I'm going to go back like a few days before the beginning of May, because Metronome, which is my global house music event brand, we just hosted our biggest event yet. We hosted the Natural History Museum on April 26th. So we did our first ever like over 1,000 people event. So it was like 1,000, I want to say like 1,100 maybe people. Okay. And we did it at the Natural History Museum of LA. And so we basically converted the Natural History Museum into a house music venue for one night. And it was incredible. We brought a big Brazilian DJ named Vision. And I would say probably, I am biased, but I would say along with everybody else that attended, it was one of the best nights of my life. And I think everybody shares that sort of opinion. And it was so successful for us that we actually secured a year of exclusivity to do public music events at the Natural History Museum. So really exciting stuff. The next event that we do there is going to be on the 31st of October. We're doing Haunted Night at the museum. We're doing a Halloween event there. And we're doubling the amount of people. We're doubling the size and scale of the event. We're going to have 2 stages with 2 lineups. It's going to be incredible. But anyway, I wanted to start with that because it feels like we went into May with so much momentum after that event. And so far in May, outside of that event, we just did our London debut on the 10th of May. And we sold out 2 days before the event. We did like 500 people for our debut. And a successful new market has opened for us. We are in, I would say, around over 10 countries now. And a lot of those countries were like, focusing on like hotspot cities where internationals enjoy house music and enjoy these like, house music events that we build experiences around. And then we went to Miami after that. So I just got back yesterday morning from Miami. We were there for a few days doing some meetings. We secured a venue for September, like a really big venue, because Miami's a big market we're focused on doing, on expanding. And then we came back yesterday morning because we had an event last night at Sunset at the Edition. So the Edition Hotel is like the luxury, one of the luxury collections of hotels from the Marriott Group. And they have a really cool club here in LA called Sunset. And so we just did an event there last night. And then on Wednesday at 6 a.m., I fly to Mexico City. We have an event on Thursday there. Then we fly Friday morning to Miami, have an event there on Friday night. And then we have our next event after that, May 31st. Well, I'm running you through May. So
I know. I can stop you, man. You've proven the chaos. This isn't chaos. This is organized as hell. But my God, this is exciting. So can you please explain to people that you're not just clubbing? What the heck are these events?
So Metronome, like I said, is a global house music event brand. So a lot of words there. Global, because we host house music events around the world. And I don't want to call us an events group or some sort of promoter, because we built a brand and we built a community around it. And so think of us as like a lifestyle brand that hosts events. We are primarily focused on events, but our community is extremely powerful. And it's the reason why we've been able to grow this brand. So Cole's seeing, and everybody else is seeing Sam's story, and they're like, Sam's just partying around the world and like tagging this Instagram event company thing. Like, I get that, right? It's how it looks on the outside. But what we're building is so much more meaningful and intricate than that. To kind of give you context, and for everybody else that's listening, like, we started at UCLA. I mean, I went to UCLA. And we started the company as 3 partners that were in our junior year, and we wanted to host an event that brought together people in a way that didn't necessarily happen at the time in LA. I would say very different type of experience, because in LA and most big cities, you think of like club culture, right? Club culture, you hear this like thing of like club culture is dying. And the reason why that's being said is because club culture is so much based around this like hierarchical experience more than it is the actual like music and the moment of the like and the experience itself. It's tables and bottle service and promoters and girls, and like it's not an authentic experience, right? And so that's why ultimately like that culture is dying, and why we're seeing pop-ups and why we're seeing a lot of different types of like unique events do so well is because people are craving experience, right? And so we looked to build and essentially build and scale at the time, and it was just going to be in LA. But build and scale this like this event brand that was focused around not just house music, because house music is so much on the come up right now. And it's also kind of the music that powers events that happen around the world, right? I would say US is a little bit behind where Europe usually is. And in Europe, house music controls the market. So we see this coming to LA and coming to the entirety of the US. And we look at that and we're like, we wanted to, initially the goal of the company was like, okay, we see the trend. We want to bring foreign feeling nightlife to the US. But on top of that, we wanted to build these really unique experiences. And so everything from the music to the curation, to the detail, to the venue, to the location. We've done airplane hangars. We've done Japanese temples. We've done the mountains of Malibu. We just did the Natural History Museum, like I said. And so kind of to answer that question, like in a roundabout way, we look to build really unique experiences around the world, but we also leverage the power of our community in order to launch in these new markets. So that's why Cole might see Sam's partying around the world, whereas I see this as like we're building a community, and I don't think anybody else is doing this right now, genuinely. I mean, we've analyzed the market like we're obsessed with it, right? And there's no other company that I can think of that's our size and scale that is. And again, a lot of these event groups are built around existing artists that have a massive presence. We're building off of an artist that doesn't have a big presence, but we're growing in tandem. And so we're building this brand and we're leveraging the power of international community in order to sell out events in London, in Jordan, in Athens, in Paris. And then of course, also leveraging the idea of like partnerships with the right brands and with the right groups and with the right people. And so that's kind of what I'm building in a nutshell, but
beautifully said. And just to make sure that people understand that you're not just some CEO high off his own supply. Like one of my work best friends, I mentioned that I was going to interview you, and I mentioned some of the things that you had been doing. And when she heard Metronome, she was like, no fucking way. She's got Italian and British roots, and she she went to USC, and she's like, yeah, those are like the coolest events. So
I love that.
Don't want to boost your ego too much, brother, but that genuinely, it is really, really cool what you guys are doing.
I'm just so happy to hear that, because we're so intentional about building the brand and like these little like sort of like, and of course, like we talked about this before, but like businesses like this. So when we're in our highs and lows, to hear the feedback of like, you guys are building something really cool, or just like somebody in passing is like, cool. That's like, that makes me really happy.
Hell yeah, dude. So for time allocation, is this where your primary, it seems like it. It seems like this is where probably 95% of your time is going lately. Because there's also, can you kind of talk to the Flair Collective a little bit and how this fits into this broader frame?
Yeah. So I think one of the most valuable things entrepreneurs can do is explain where they're at, but also be very transparent, right, with the process. Because I think there's a level of vulnerability that's so valuable when you're talking from the perspective of someone building. And for me, there's still so much I'm figuring out. Like, I'm not sitting here saying that I have everything figured out. I'm not sitting here saying I'm a train wreck, but I would say I'm somewhere in the middle, because that's part of entrepreneurship. So to kind of like, the reason I say that is because one of my biggest challenges is that I've committed to 2 big projects that I enjoy so much, and I'm so passionate about it, and passionate about both projects. So it's to the point where like the time allocation, the value allocation, the value add, and the resource that I am to those businesses has to be creative. Because I agree that from the perspective of an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs out there, like my recommendation is go all in on one thing. I've committed to 2 different projects because just transparently, I committed to these 2 projects when they were very small, right? Or just starting out. And it was more of like, when you're in college and you're experimenting with new projects and ideas, I've started so many businesses that you won't even hear about in this podcast or in this interview, because I'm a very entrepreneurial person that allowed my kind of like free creative spirit of entrepreneurship to fly in college. I was like, let me try everything, and then I'll figure out what I enjoy. And whatever starts to scale the most because I'm putting the most time into it and because I enjoy it the most, that's what I'll start to focus on. I've gotten to the point where 2 businesses have become very successful and are continuing to grow. And so my time commitment to both depends on the moment, the project, where we are, right? And so Metronome, I would say my time commitment fluctuates between somewhere around 20 to like 30%. And it might sound like 95%, but it's because I'm obsessive over what I'm building. And when I speak to Flair, and which I'm about to get into, you'll like the perspective on the outside is probably like, oh, he puts 90% of time into that. But it's because of this like obsessive, I have an obsessive quality where it's like, I have ADHD. So I get distracted really easily. And I have like the shiny object syndrome, even within my businesses. So to be obsessed and focused on something, it takes an extreme amount of interest and passion on my end in order for me to sustain that interest. So Flair, to kind of speak on that, is we're essentially a marketing company that helps brands connect with the college demographic. So we work with everyone from Coca-Cola to Monster Energy to Feastables to even other Coca-Cola products like vitamin water, smart water. We've worked with different types of brands, everything from apps to wellness to, activewear to CPG. And we essentially will do everything from like the physical activation side to digital presence, building ambassador programs, student feedback. And I would consider us less of operating on like a traditional agency model, and we more so operate on a creative model, because there's so many different types of brands that are looking for very different types of things in the college space. And the college space is so ever changing that building a business model around it is at least for me, it's been extremely challenging. And now I don't have the operational mind, but around Flair, what we are building is essentially now we're building a suite of opportunities for brands to interact with college. So we have within Flair 2 new subsidiaries. One of them is Campus Link, which we just raised our first check, and really exciting actually partnership with the largest college travel agency in the country. And they put a check in. They're also they're receiving shares on an advisory level to bring in a lot of value. But that platform's focus is to connect brands to college events. And then we also have a college conference that we're building as well as another kind of subsidiary concept to connect brands with student leaders, athletes, and creators. And so everything for Flair is, I would say, for the most part, focused on how do we help brands and college students connect, and how do we optimize the way they work together. And I would say, even though we're not as an agency entirely restricted to the college demographic, like I will work on other types of influencer campaigns. We just did a campaign with the city of Inglewood and the biggest billboard company in Inglewood. We will do other projects because at the end of the day, I'm not going to restrict the company to cool opportunities, outside of like the bounds of college. But I would say we're extremely focused on a baseline level on the next generation. So next Gen Z, that's definitely what we're focused on when it comes to like the creative marketing side. But that's kind of a synopsis of Flair. Yeah.
Makes a ton of sense, dude. Yeah, it's incredible. And I do deeply resonate with the idea of like feeling what actually right now feels right and then trying to choose to sink your teeth into it. And I think I'm slowly learning it. It's an attribute that you've definitely displayed in full, but like most of the people that I've been chatting with, the entrepreneur types, they seem to just like not click or not hit the brake until their body says hit the brake. They're like, I have full curiosity, full interest right now. Like, fuck the Huberman protocol. Like, I don't need my sleep right now. Like, let's sprint on this. Let's enjoy this. Let's take advantage of this momentum. And I think maybe I'm completely misunderstanding you, but it seems like you saying people think 90% of your time is allocated to Campus Link. Maybe because at certain moments you might just have a random day in your month where you just like throw yourself at Campus Link or you throw yourself at Flair. Excuse me, I meant to say Flair the first time. But yeah, is that kind of how that operates?
Yeah, I just think that it's still such a learning process for me that it comes with a priority. Like I have this like sort of radar on like what is going to be the most highest leverage thing that I need to provide value to at the moment. And I think one of the biggest things too is like actually one of my partners we just had like a big discussion of like he feels like at times he doesn't have a full-time partner invested in Metronome with him, right? And like that to me is an extremely important piece of feedback because it's like, okay, when you are working on 2 different projects, and if you are in a situation like mine, it's really hard because you could sit here watching this and be like, why don't you just pick one? Because like clearly you're not able to do both. It's more complicated than that because you have these 2 projects. You're really passionate about both. You're not at the point where you sell one or the other or are disinvolved from one or the other. And so then you're in a situation where, yeah, you've put yourself in this situation. Both happen to work out. So now you have to pay the price when it comes to time commitment, when it comes to dedication. You have to be twice as time committed, twice as dedicated. And especially now at Flair, we're building a platform that's raising. So it's like 3 times, you know what I mean? It's like within Flair, there's another company and then there's a conference. And like, so there are these things where I think and what you're hearing as well is like, this guy doesn't know how to focus on a project. And I admit that that's the struggle of like being someone that's passionate about multiple different projects that you're working on that have started to scale. But what I will say is that you get to this point where you do have to say no to a lot of different things, like a lot of different opportunities. And like, this is an iceberg situation, right? Like I'm presenting the iceberg and people are like, wow, there's so much, but there's an entire mountain of opportunities I've said no to. Big salary jobs, big advising and consulting offers to like help companies, either host events around the world or host events, in specific, areas or cities or locations. Everything from the event and hospitality side, I would say I am becoming an expert just because of how involved I am in this market. Same thing with like different brands, companies wanting to hire me more internally or as a consultant to help them grow their college sort of like influence, but as an in-house role. And so like there have been all these different types of opportunities that have come along, that have come across, that I've said no to because I am dedicated on what I'm building. But within what I'm building, I have these ambitious goals. But what I've started to get good at, and what I'm starting to develop an ability to do, which I'm really excited about, is delegating work to the right people, understanding how to build those like sort of like teams, even if they're small teams, and having those workflows be managed from a managerial standpoint, like be managed by other people. Because I've been someone that for the longest time, it's been difficult because I lack the operational ability. My time, because we were talking about this, like 90% goes to Flair, but then you talk about Metronome, it sounds like 90% goes there. The reality is 180% of time, right? So like less sleep and more hours is the reality. That's what I've committed to. But now what I'm really focused on doing, especially because it's become more and more necessary and I've been pushed, right, to make this a reality, is how do I empower other people to take over these workflows so that I'm higher level across the board? Because I think my biggest value add is being higher level, right? And so everything from giving away equity into new projects to paying offshore talent, to even just empowering people with an opportunity, especially like, for example, I have somebody at UCLA who is just excited about the opportunity to work in the space of marketing. And I've empowered them with the tools, with the resources, and with my personal network in order to scale a workflow within my agency that he runs himself. And so I've started to learn these new ways to provide accountability to and build workflows around other people so that my time commitment isn't the thing that's driving these sort of initiatives forward, if that makes sense.
It makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and I think there's a thing that I want to linger on within what you were saying, and it was your capacity to say no, your effectiveness at saying no that's had to be honed lately. And I think it's really interesting because I think, and tell me if this hypothesis is wrong, it probably was preceded with you getting really skilled at saying yes, because you had hyper initiative early on, and then now it's learning how to get really skilled at saying no. And I want to get to some of like the yeses that you basically said early on. And there's one that I'm particularly thinking about that you told me about on our first call, your kind of opportunity at the age of 19 to do kind of club promo, something that a lot of people do not maybe jump towards or think that a 19-year-old would be doing. And that's something that you seem to go full speed ahead with and seem to springboard some opportunities. And I don't want to take away all the thunder, so I want you to speak to this, but maybe just talking about what are some of like the yeses that you said early on in college or entrepreneurially that led to this point of you having the fun problem. It might feel shitty right now, but it's ultimately a nice problem to have of getting to say no.
Yeah. So real, just raw, authentic, sort of the truthful story, right? I was a freshman and I was going into I was like end of freshman year at UCLA. And my girlfriend at the time was a stoner and she liked smoking with her friend. And so we would go to her friend's apartment and we would go into like the middle courtyard and they would smoke together. And her neighbor was somebody that she smoked with. And that neighbor's friend was one of the biggest club promoters in LA. So I happened to just meet him in that instance. And he told me, hey, he's like, look, I mean, he thought that my girlfriend and her friend were attractive. So he was like, hey, look, if you ever want to bring them to the club and some other people, let me know. And I was like, cool. My ex at the time had a promoter that she wouldn't switch away from. This is just, I'm telling you that this is how it happened.
This is super helpful.
And so when we broke up, I was like, well, I want to go to the clubs. Like it was $100 for guys to get in. And I was like, as a freshman, I'm like, I don't have $100 of disposable, money or no income. And so, out of state college kid to do that, like I'm already spending so much money on tuition. I couldn't even think of like another $100 at a club. And so, I reached out to him and after we broke up and I was like, hey, I want to come to the club. He's like, bring 6 girls and I'll get you in for free. And I was like, cool. So I rounded up 6 of my girlfriends and, we went to the club and it was amazing. I had the best time. And so this was like not really business oriented in the beginning. It was more just like, I wanted to have fun. I wasn't in a frat. And then he's like, look, if you come next time with 8 people, then I will get you a limo paid for by the club. I was like, oh, that's sick. So I rounded up like 8 people. He gave me a limo. He's like, look, if you do this, but with 12 people and you can bring 12 girls, I'll give you a limo and I'll pay you. And I was like, whoa. So I'm getting paid to go have fun at the club. This is awesome. But I quickly realized that like how big of an opportunity this was and how big of an opportunity it became. So now let's get into the business, right?
Yeah.
So promoting initially just started for fun for me. But when I went to the clubs, I noticed a lot of different things just because like I am also like very analytical and like I'm always trying to find business opportunities. I've been this way since I was young. And so I realized that I had access to attractive young college girls as friends. And I was providing them with a safer experience. In my opinion, it's much safer than like some older promoter. Majority of these promoters are like old and weirdos. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, cool, I'm offering them like a better experience with someone that's their age. And it's like we're going out and having a fun night together and they're my friends. But I realized that I had something that the rich people paying for $2,000 to $5,000 to even $10,000 for a table on an artist night, I had something that they wanted. And they had something that I wanted, which is all these people that had disposable income to spend $10,000 on a table on a random Tuesday. They had a majority of these people had, successful businesses. And so I realized that when I was 19, there was this exchange of value, right? Of I have this, like, so I'm young and I'm, social and charismatic and I have a lot of, girlfriends that you're attracted to as an older guy. But I'm going to leverage this in order to have a conversation with you and become a part of your network, for you to become a part of my network. And so I would go to the tables at the clubs in LA. So like all these clubs in LA that were like table focused. And in order to get in as a guy, you have to pay a massive cover charge or you have to have a bottle minimum for a table. And I would look for the non-promoter bottles because there's bottles, the cheap bottles that they give promoters. And then I could tell that, if they didn't have those bottles and they had like 1942 or Grey Goose or whatever else they were spending. And so I would go to those tables and I would just introduce myself. I'd be like, hey, that's my table over there. I'd point to a table with a bunch of girls at it. I'd be like, I just want to say hi. I work here with the hospitality company. If you need anything, just let me know. And so then I would give out my phone number. They would kind of see the table and then they'd be like, oh, so we would start having a conversation. But I ultimately realized at this point that even though there was an exchange of value, there was still nothing that I could really do for them, outside of the clubs. Like what's my value, right? And I was starting to think about like, I go to UCLA, like, I'm very business minded, but they're looking at me as a promoter. And so I was like, well, how do I break out of just that perception? So I went from getting all those numbers to then I was like, well, as long as I just say that there's something like based on whatever they're talking about, if there's just something I say I can offer them, even if it's a small offer, I'm going to be much more memorable because I'll be considered someone that can add value. Right. And so that's how I got my first internship. My first job was from the clubs. I went around to like a table this one night and I met this guy who was partnered with Addison Rae's dad on a social media marketing agency. And they were helping Fortune 1000 companies with like TikTok content. So like short form content production. And I was like, yeah, I know tons of like college influencers and, I, also work with the nightclub. So I know a lot of, I know how to build ambassador programs and this was all BS, like whatever. But I just kind of angled it as like, there is something that I can provide to you. And that started converting for me to the point where after this, meeting this guy who had a table, I went from not only being like him being a table client of mine when he would go out to the clubs, but he gave me an internship. And so I started working in social media with zero experience and honestly zero experience and zero like prior intent. I was just, kind of like aimless. Like I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I was 19. So I knew I wanted to build a business, but
a 19-year-old that doesn't know what they want to do. Jesus, man.
So anyway, kind of to speed up the story, like that's where the nightlife experience really came into play. Cause then I had that internship. I went from that internship to a salaried role at a company that raised $20 million. And then I went from that company to starting my own agency. And so like my entire network was built off of that series of things like, nightlife promotion. And then that social media agency, I met tons of influencers. And then I was hired by one of the biggest, creator economy companies at the time. To build out their like social and community initiatives. And that all happened from the nightclubs. So like I did say yes to this opportunity to kind of like get back to what we were talking about. I said yes to this opportunity, but a lot of it was like very sequenced. And that's kind of why I wanted to explain that whole process.
Thank you for not forcing it into the narrative. Yeah, that was much more transparent. Yeah,
but it's like, I'm just like, it happened because of my ex and then I met someone and then I leveraged that, opportunity, and then I grew that opportunity. And then I started realizing like all these people that are buying tables are rich. And then I went and talked to them, and then I built my network that way. And I have everything to owe to being in nightlife. A lot of people talk about like, oh, promoters are the most well-connected people. But I think the majority of promoters that I'm friends with, or that I know, or that I've seen through experience, just don't know how to leverage them. Because you get so well connected to all the right people. And even to this day, I know tons of promoters that are more well connected than me, but they just don't know how to leverage the network. I think what I did really well was I went into nightlife promotion, but I started to leverage the network to build my own opportunities. Because if you can leverage the network you build in nightlife, especially at a young age, you are way ahead of everybody. And so that's kind of where I started and why I said yes to that opportunity. And it opened every door that I would say, in a direct or indirect way, every single door that I was able to then take advantage of.
Yeah. Dude, first off, good ass storytelling. Second off, let's linger on networking. Because I think that's the one that I get the most frequently pissed off about, surrounding like young people's underestimation of it, or their consideration of most jobs out there actually being meritocratic, or most experiences out there being meritocratic. Universities are not meritocratic. College jobs are not meritocratic. Virtually everything out there you get because you know the right person, or you've been in the right places at the right time. If you've been to UCLA, you will realize there is quite a few head scratchers that walk the hallways of UCLA. If you are in any excellent company, you'll recognize probably the same thing. If you spend time with billionaires, they're not just like better people. There's a lot of opportunity that comes about, and it's frequently via connection. And you have really developed this skill. So I want to get to one, actually just primarily, what is your philosophy surrounding networking? And it's probably evolved quite a bit over time. But like, clearly you, whenever you enter an environment, kind of have this networking angle that you want to play. You're probably considering, okay, where is there some place where is the conversation that I can have here that is value additive down the line? But more generally, I'm just curious, like, how do you think about networking, and how do you think about building connection?
We go back to like when I was going around tables meeting people. I had a lot to prove, right? I had so much I needed to prove. I had nothing, right? At the time, I was leveraging attractive girls at a table under club lights in order to like seem impressive, or like in order to have some sort of angle of like, give a shit about me, please. Like, I want to talk to you.
Yep.
And I think so therefore, so my point is that I had to be a lot more intentional, especially like in the beginning of my like career, whatever you want to call it. But I think over time, it just becomes a lot more natural. And now I do have something I can provide, right? Like now I have a business, like a global house music event brand, and I have a successful marketing agency with subsidiary companies. Like now I can speak to those things, and I know that comfortably, even if I'm speaking to someone that isn't in these industries or that I can't directly provide something to, I give off the sort of, I would say like just by the experience and by the work that I do, I give off the vibe that I have a network and that I am able to provide value to most people. So most like people I reach out to, or most people I talk to, I get that like sort of level of respect. And so the networking now is much more like casual. It's much more, it's much less directed and much less intentional, unless there's a specific reason why I'm reaching out to somebody. But the reality is that I've collected such a massive network over time that the majority of new people I meet are through other people that already there's already this like layer of credibility, right? Are through people that already sort of, feel as if I'm doing the right things, or, they already feel as if I'm qualified, right? To connect to one person or the other. Like at this point in time, I would say my network is much more accelerated at a young age, to the point where I'm put in group chats. I'm put in probably like, honestly, I mean, this is just the truth. I'm put in like 5 to 10 group chats a day at this point. Some days, like obviously like 1 or 2, but like there's some days where I'm put into like 10 or 11 different group chats of like, hey, this like connecting you to Sam. Sam does blah, 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 blah. And this is so-and-so, and she owns this type of company or whatever it is, this, that, and the other. And I think you guys should talk. And so a lot of people that are in my network now, like I'm one of the first people that comes to mind when somebody needs like a lot of different things, because I was in Nightlife, and then sort of in the hospitality space. And then I have this global brand. So I'm, like I would say like my network is now globally distributed. So people think of me as the person to go to, even if they know that I'm in marketing and events. Like they might come to me and be like, hey, like was curious if I wanted to connect you to so-and-so because he's raising for his company right now. And I, wondered if you might have some connections for him to raise. And I'm just giving random examples, but networking now is a lot different than it used to be. And I think that's just the nature of like the trajectory of networking. Like in the beginning, you have to be really, really intentional to build the network. But for me, I've gotten to, and I feel very fortunate that people think of me, but I've gotten to this point where it's much more fluid, to be honest. Yeah.
And to speak to that, I mean, on our first call, you ended it saying like, if there's anyone you need to be put in touch with, like, please let me know, man. You have this like, there's this karmic nature to connecting, where if you're willing to put other people in touch, usually they're willing to put you in touch. And there's also as there is with virtually every game that exists nowadays, the games are exponential, where like once you develop enough stamps, once you develop a large enough network, it just freaking rocket launches.
That's exactly how I feel. Like it's an exponential function. Like it has this exponential function to it that's natural and sort of like native to networking, where, and it is also very karmic. Like it is also very much so that way, because it's a lot of, I get the same way that I get put in group chats all the time. I'm also the person that people come to when they need something or when they need some sort of connection, because I'm the person they think of. And so it's like, okay, cool. Like I have this massive, like one of the big things that I'm actually doing right now, Cole, is I'm working with my new executive assistant to build like a CRM of my entire network, regardless of what business. Like I have a master CRM I'm building out, and it's going to be tagged by different industries, sub industries, because I realize like one of the highest leverage things that I have right now is my network. And it's only going to keep growing. But if it's not operationalized, there's 90% of my network, or I would say 95% of people in my network, I don't think of on a daily basis, or I don't remember. And so I'll save a contact, and then the contact is in my phone. So when someone asks for something, I won't remember Rebecca in the health industry that invests in health tech startups that I met 3.5 years ago at some founders and investors dinner.
Shout out Rebecca.
Not even a real person. But, I think that like, that is something that I really strive to do better at, is like the more value I can add to the other people in my network, the more exponential that network will grow. And then the more value I can add to more people, right? It's like, that's just the way that this sort of game works. And so, but yeah, I'm very open to like, I'm always like, I try to be very clear about my network being very vast, and me being very open about sharing my network to other people, because I know it comes back tenfold.
And I two things. One, I think you're so good at saying what you do offer, saying where you're valuable. And I think a lot of people, I think we have a culture in America sometimes, or culture especially in other countries, to not say what we have or what we can deliver or how we're valuable, because we might think of it coming off as arrogant potentially, or but being too full of ourselves, when really it's the truth. Or even if it's not the truth, sometimes, like maybe what you were saying earlier with like the club promoters, it's not like it's too far from the truth. And it's something that it's like, there's literally no one that's a victim from this situation. And it's super powerful to just actually speak to the power that you have, or speak to the value you can deliver. But I want to linger on trying to make this tactical for someone that is not maybe in, I think both of our shoes. I mean, I think like having the silly stamp that I have on my resume with my firm, and getting my UCLA degree, and now you with your entrepreneurship, for both of us, it's gotten a lot freaking easier to connect with people. But for people that are not in our shoes, what's the tactic? How can they basically develop this ethos before they have the ethos? Do you have any recommendations?
Both of us started from a perspective where we wanted the answer to the same question. And I think I think that, I will revisit this point I made, where if you are able to, in some way, shape, or form, this is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I offer in terms of building network, and getting to the point where you are given this sort of like, hypothetical sort of like stamp of approval, right? When it comes to this stuff, is if you position yourself as being able to offer something, you are much more likely to be remembered. I'll say it again. If you are able to position yourself as you're able to offer something to the person that you're trying to network with, or to the person that you want to add to your network, you are going to be much more memorable to them, because people are always subconsciously looking for value. They're looking for ways to add value to what they're working on, to their life, whatever it is. And especially when you're young and you're disadvantaged when it comes to network because you're young and you haven't built that yet, the best thing that you can do is try to leave someone with the impression of like, I feel like this person can add value to what I'm working on. Because even if you're 18, 19 years old, for example, at UCLA, let's use UCLA as an example, or college as a whole. You are actively in a community of tons of different people that are working on tons of cool different things and that are working towards goals. And they're very early on in those stages, right? And I think that like there is a lot of value in building a wide network when you're in college. But if you're trying to network with people that are older, like the first thing that you can add value to almost instantly is the perspective of someone who's young, right? Because that's always, and generally it's very, very valuable. And so I think that there's a lot of easy ways to kind of like to start that. I mean, again, like if you have other abilities, like you're able to code or whatever it is, and that person has a tech project, maybe that's a more specific piece of value that might sort of accelerate the growth of that relationship between you and that person. But I think that from a general level, like, you know, that's kind of like where Flair comes into play of like, I was this person that people like companies started coming to. More like from a freelance perspective of like, how do we, you know, we'd love for you to help us with like our influencer marketing, with our next generation marketing, or, oh, you're in college and you are head of social and community at this startup. We were wondering if you could help us build our ambassador program or whatever, this, that, whatever. And I think that like I position myself from that perspective of like, I can offer advice or even execution when it comes to initiatives that your company or business might be focused on, in terms of reaching the next generation or working with the next generation or resonating with the next generation, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, like I think that's maybe speaks to a specific example, but if you're able to position yourself in a way where you can add value to someone that you're trying to build network with in some way, shape, or form, you're going to be more memorable. And I think you're going to be more successful about building.
And I want to tack on a few ways of providing value that are a little bit less intuitive. I love what you said. I think there's an underestimation of how much making someone feel like they're a teacher or that they're providing value or that they're a sage, like making someone feel that way is really valuable. Like a lot of people love feeling like a lot of people would prefer to be the sage than the student. And if you're able to
bring that
listen
out
to their wisdom, and just like seemingly be curious and ready to run with their wisdom, there's actually something of like an equal investment there, where like the person now is like, oh, let's see how my wisdom plays out if this is my exhibit A. Like, and that's something I think young people can leverage, is their extreme potential and their like, if you actually listen to somebody, you get a conversation with someone and you show like, yeah, I'm going to try to go about it with your blueprint, they're going to just be even more invested. And I think, I know the messages that I respond to the most when people reach out to me are humorously ones that make me feel good about myself. They're ones where somebody actually did a little bit of research and they actually found something that I also like about me, and they call it out.
No, it's a really good point you make. Honestly, that's another massive, massive sort of shortcut into like networking. Because what I will add to that is people, especially like founders or business owners, they're so focused and honed in on the like actual build of the business and like being inside the business that like whenever they get an opportunity to speak about it, they want to express everything they've been doing. So it's like, if you bring that out in them, not only are you receiving value because they're telling you how they did it and they're telling you like what they're doing and they're being transparent because they want to overshare what they've been holding inside of them. Because you have to remember, like, these business owners, even if someone asked them that question 2 days ago, so much happened in the past 2 days they haven't talked about because they've been lasered inside the business, like laser focused inside the business. So if you're young and you're able to bring that out in them, you learn and they remember you as the person who listened. And yeah, of course, like if you're then going to apply that in some way, shape or form as well, then like what you're learning through that conversation, they love the sort of, this sort of sense of support or accountability towards a method that they've been a method of business that they've been working on, or some sort of specific, way of conducting business that like you're then inspired to go and like replicate. Like I love seeing that. If someone like is listening to me and they're like, wow, that's such, like I had this happen, and someone was like, I explained to them a creative way to build an ambassador program. I was like, as an ambassador program or like an affiliate program. I was like, structure it as an internship so you can reach out to like official departments at different universities and structure it on a higher level as an internship, but it's just a disguise. It's just a facade of like an ambassador program, or like an affiliate program. Anyway, but they were so inspired that they went and tested it, and they came back to me and told me it was super successful. And I was like, that is so awesome to hear that like I was able to impact a project that way. And I get so bogged down into the business too, that happens, for me. And this person I was telling you about, this student at UCLA who was just so inspired. He was not only able to draw out ideas and get me to overshare about the business, but he pinpointed problems in my business based on what I was sharing with him. And then he went on about different ways to go fix it. And I was like, wow, this is, and so, yeah, those moments are really incredible. And I would say like, I commend the way he networked himself into my life and now into working for me. So
yeah, that's so badass. Yeah. I think so. Like some of the words, maybe the words that mean the most to me in this world is when somebody says you inspired me, like almost even more when somebody says I love you. Like you inspired me just has, and I think it's almost because it lends to a level of self-love, like an extreme self-love following that of like, fuck yeah, I did inspire them. Oh my God. And it really provides this meaning to your days. I love this. I love this, this general sentiment. I'm curious for, one thing that I've been realizing is the power of being annoying. And I kind of wanted to test this hypothesis with you, where I realized that people I sometimes will actually hop on a call with are not people that I necessarily would want to hop on a call with. And they're actually the people that have just lived in my inbox long enough. And I'm not sure if this is true for most people, because I chatted with another friend and they're like, no, I just like get super irritated. But like, if they had enough personality and they just like, they seemed interesting enough in their initial reach out, and then they just kept on going. Like they just actually, after I sent them eventually my phone number and I said, yeah, I'll make time. And then when they said, how about now? And I said, I can't do now. And they said, how about we calendar something? And I said, okay, maybe something, or like, I'll call you on a commute. And I just keep on kind of putting it off because there's a scarcity of time and a lot of people want to talk. But the persistence eventually works. Eventually I'm like, stop freaking texting me. I'll hop on a call. And I don't know if this also works towards you at all, because I kind of want this to be advice I can give out, but maybe for a lot of people being annoying is like the worst possible thing they can do. But I'm curious, does this annoying strategy resonate at all to you?
I would say that like I was the person that was really annoying, and I continue to be for a lot of people that I'm trying to network with, where I'm like there's a company right now that we're trying to do like a big partnership with on the conference. They're one of the biggest brands in the world, and we're trying to host the conference as like an entire partnership with them. The concept itself, the location of where we host it at their headquarters, everything. And I know I've been annoying for this guy. I know how busy he is. And I think that there is a way to be less annoying while being annoying, because the baseline of following up so much is just in nature annoying. And so there's ways to be creative about it. I think now I speak from two different levels, right? Because again, I'm a young entrepreneur. So I speak from the perspective of being the person that's like following up, and also being the person that gets a lot of people that reach out to them. I get reached out to all the time. And I think I've noticed through both my actions towards doing it and my action and my sort of like also just like noticing how it's done, how people approach that when they're trying to connect with me. I've learned that there's ways to make it work. Because, for example, if I reach out, let's say that I'm trying to network with you, or there's a project I want to work with you on, or whatever, or I want you to sponsor my event or something like that. I've noticed that based on the initial responses, or you can kind of get a gauge once you get a response from someone, or when you've been talking to them and then it goes cold, like you can kind of like understand that like when there's a difference between like, we're just super busy versus like, we're uninterested. And I think that like, when people are uninterested, but I want them to know about the growth that I'm having and that I might become more interesting over time. Because when you connect with someone and they are kind of uninterested, when I connected with people a year ago and they were uninterested, I know that there's a lot of people I connected to a year ago that now they would love to work with me on what I'm working on because what I've done has grown. And so there's a strategic way to do it where you can like provide them with updates. You know, it's like, hey, look, totally, you know, understand that, you know, you might be super busy. Just wanted to provide some updates, or even like, here's a video of our most recent event. We just did 1,200 people in the Natural History Museum. Cool. As a brand, you didn't want to work with us when we struggled to sell 200-300 tickets, but now we're doing 1,200 people and we have an exclusive contract with the Natural History Museum. Let's talk. And I think that like, there's a casual way to approach it in some cases where it's less annoying, but the baseline is that it is annoying. Because you're following up with someone that's uninterested, or they have so much on their plate that like whatever. But there's ways to be strategic about it. So
completely. Yeah. Really, really well put. I think the persistence might be the more simple way to put it. But yeah,
just to kind of put it out there though, Cole, I'm an advocate. I am an advocate for you being baseline annoying, right? Yeah. Because it is annoying to follow up multiple times. Just be persistent, because at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. If I'm persistent with 100 brands and 10 brand representatives are annoyed, I don't care. I don't give a shit. Because if they're annoyed, they're going to regret that in 10 years. That's the way I look at it. They're going to regret that in 1 year. They're going to regret that in 6 months. But it's a numbers game in terms of persistence, especially when you're young and you're looking to prove yourself, because the brand that does give you the chance and that does take a chance on you, or the person that does, you're going to prove them right, and you're going to prove everybody else wrong, that they should have taken you more seriously. And I think that's just like what I would say from that perspective, but I advocate for it because I think that sometimes you just have to do that in order to break into an industry or a job, or in order to get what you want. I'm seeing a lot on LinkedIn, people showing how they got jobs and how they were creative about getting a position or getting an interview. And I think that like sometimes it just is a mix of creativity and persistence and luck. You know what I mean? It's a mix of those factors, but it's a numbers game.
Completely. I think the more life experience I get, the more I realize that everything is fucking venture capital. Like literally every game in life is taking more risks, and you'll find more unicorns. And it applies to many life philosophies, but also especially in the professional realm. And I think the annoying piece, I just hear so many friends that think reaching out twice is annoying. And I'm like, you should have seen some of the messages I've sent to people.
Twice is
rookie numbers.
I was about to say it's rookie numbers.
Like literally last week, there's this home wellness and kind of microplastic brand that I've been working on with some friends, and there was this call with the guy that we ended up landing a call with the dude that basically published that crazy study that said that there's like a spoon in your brain worth of microplastics. It was like picked up by People magazine, picked up by a ton of places. And he proved that like there's 10x greater microplastics in the brains of people with Alzheimer's or dementia than healthy samples. Terrifying. Sorry for anyone that's listening to this that didn't need to know this about microplastics.
I'm now terrified.
But ultimately this, I know, kind of wild. But then this guy, like I followed him I connected with him on LinkedIn and then started liking his post casually. And then I reached out to him, didn't reply. Reached out to him again, didn't reply. Reached out to him one more time. He replied excitedly. We ended up hopping on a call. It was a wonderful hour. And he taught us so much. And I think like something that I've been trying to get into my head, and I think other people should get into their heads, is it's like the bad guy isn't the youngin' looking for advice. The bad guy is the old head that chooses to like not provide any wisdom or not try to share his time with like the people that are behind him. I know that sounds, saying good or bad is weird here, but I think it allows you to forfeit this feeling of awkwardness or annoyingness from your just efforts to network.
Right. Yeah. And it's also like you never know what's going on in that person's life. You never know. Everyone's human aside from owning a business or being someone on LinkedIn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You never know what's going on in their life outside of business, or even inside of business, and inside of their job or inside of their role, or in terms of whatever you're trying to network with them for. And so I think at the end of the day, it is just, you have to look at it from a perspective of like, there is no way to know. So be annoying and take that risk of, it's not even a risk, I would say, but like take the initiative to step outside of the comfort zone of, should I email this guy a third time, and do it, because you might get a response that you got. And I think that a lot of the time, people just assume that like things are out of reach. Just assume that everything is within reach, because everyone's human. We're made up of the same shit. Some people are just older shit than us, if anything, we're more valuable. We're going to be here for longer. We're closer to taking over. And so, I think that, that the advocacy for doing that, and these examples of showing how possible it is to kind of like, follow up. And then the third time you get a response like that, and then you gain so much value from doing that. Had you not reached out the third time, you wouldn't have gotten that. And there's so many examples.
And had you reached out and he didn't respond, so what?
Yeah. So
yeah. I want to
same page.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor annoying too much here, but yeah, I love this. Thanks for helping my hypothesis grow a little bit.
Very true.
And I want to talk about what for me resonated the most in my chat with Alex in the last episode, which was like the financial journey. And I know it's super taboo to talk about finances, and it's one of the things I've freaking hated the most over the last couple of years of my life, because I've realized that oftentimes the people that keep it taboo are people that are either very, very wealthy, and it's almost disabling other people's opportunities to build wealth, or it's people that don't want to feel bad about their financial position. But the more I've learned, like if you can come to financial conversations without deep insecurity, it's so empowering. Because you realize, like we've been talking about several times here, that there's not some like special sauce to billionaires. And I think getting through your head, like people just took chances, people just did certain things, or there's this industry that this one person's been continually double clicking on, and that's really just yielded epic value for them. And understanding like, okay, how well am I actually doing at the age of 23 or at 18 or at 33 compared to my peers? Should I be investing? I mean, I have so many conversations with friends that like their only mechanism, and I'm not judging, but like either they're living in New York or something and they're not saving or investing a single cent, or they think like their 401k is their ticket, which I'm sorry, I like shit on 401ks quite frequently, because I just think that like, I don't think people understand you can't really touch that until you're old and gross, and otherwise you get hit with a massive penalty. And there's like other methods of investment, other methods that the dinosaurs that preach to you that this is the only way to save and invest, or this is the only way to like use your money, that could be more valuable, but instead we just kind of quiet it all off. So I'm just curious for you, Sam, if you're willing to talk a little bit about the financial facet of the last couple of years, maybe where you currently are, and you don't have to tell me what you're making, but just talking about maybe your investment strategies or what's been like the big financial wins in your life. It would be super insightful.
So, okay. On the business level, right? Metronome is at the point where we're doing multiple six figures in revenue per year. And like, this is, again, we're about a year and a half old, but here's the sort of, the catch is, to building a business, you're reinvesting everything most times. So, I mean, there's definitely cash businesses out there where you start a business, you put some money up front, and then, you're earning cash flow. And I think that kind of speaks a little bit more towards Flair, which I'll touch on. But Metronome, I own 33%. I own a third. I have two partners. We all own a third. One of us, not me, gets paid a salary to essentially run and operate the business full time. We also have employees. So we have people on retainers / salaries to perform different tasks, like to fulfill different roles. Like we have a social media manager, we have a graphic designer, we have a creative director, essentially our own like in-house creative team, and they get paid every month. And so we do have these sort of like operating expenses, and we also reinvest the money that we do profit every month back into the business. And so the roundabout way is I don't get paid from Metronome, even though Metronome, I would say it does well, and every single event, pretty much every single event is profitable. And, some are even more profitable than others, to the point where, this business is a sustainable and it is a growing business. And I would say on a financial level, the business is successful. But, because there's so much that we're building and because our goals are so ambitious, we understand that from a financial perspective, the money has to stay in the business. So you're like, well, Samuel, then how do you pay rent? Right. So then let me get into Flair. Flair from the beginning was my cash business, right? I used Flair in order, and before I had any employees and before I had anybody else a part of the company or a part of any subsidiaries, or before I had a subsidiary, I used Flair as a way to make money. But I would say, a unique situation when it comes to finances, because when I worked at the startup that I worked at, I was earning salary, but my parents were paying my bills because I was still in college. So I was able to save money while working at that startup. I also, before bringing in employees for Flair, I took on a couple different campaigns that did very well. And I won't get into what they were exactly, but these two, 3 different campaigns, primarily one, made me a lot of money. It made me multiple 6 figures, I would say. Essentially I already had the business, so multiple 6 figures in revenue for the business. And so I did walk away from those campaigns with a good sum of money. And, I have a sense of security from that. And so I would say that there are different things that happen in the course of the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey that I would say I got really lucky. But I also, of course, I would say I also credit myself. I put myself in a position to earn those opportunities. Mm-hmm. But I would say that, there are times in the business where when it gets very difficult, I do have a sense of a safety net that I've built for myself. And that allows me to take more risks, I would say, especially when it comes to finances. But Flair also as a business is cash flow positive because it's an agency. So even though Metronome, and you can look at it as a startup, and even when we talk about like Campus Link, which is a subsidiary of Flair, it's a platform that's raising VC money. And we're not at the point where we've closed out our round, not even close to that point yet. We're I'd say actually really excited about the conversations right now that we're having with VCs and other investors. But that company doesn't pay me at the moment. It's more of a startup. And a lot of the money we're going to be, bringing in from that business is going to be reinvested. Mm-hmm. Metronome, I don't get paid because we're reinvesting into that business. So my money comes from Flair, because Flair as an agency, we take on campaigns and we build margin. So like I look at a campaign that I take on, I know how much it's going to cost me. And then I know how much I want to make off of it or how much it makes sense to make off of it. And then I build a pricing model for that. Right. And so, I pay for my bills with Flair. And I also sometimes pay for my bills with my savings that I earned through my salary job when I was in college, and then through some of the big campaigns that I was a part of when I didn't even have a full team or even somewhat of a team to take care of and to pay on a monthly basis. And so that's kind of like where my financial situation is. Flair is still at a point where it does multiple 6 figures in revenue per year, and I would say some campaigns range from a 20% margin to a 40% margin. And then there's some internal sort of costs associated. And so, I would say that, that's kind of like the sort of financial landscape that I deal with right now. Mm-hmm. But I hope that kind of provides a little bit more clarity of like, as an entrepreneur, that's kind of like where I am. And I think I've positioned different things in a way where I'm not as financially stressed. And so I think that's like something I'm like I said, I feel very fortunate of, and it allows for me to have a clearer mind and make decisions less based on just finances and more based on what I think is best for the business.
Completely. Yeah. Super insightful. And it creates a lot of, I guess, leeway, but also a lot of, it creates I'm blanking on the exact word here, but basically you have a long leash of like how long you can push with theoretically, like let's say Metronome did get struck by lightning in some way, and there was some problems that really occurred. Like having some stability, having some security is quite critical. And I think the investment. Go for it, dude.
Sorry, just really quick. Another thing that's really important to note is, as a business owner, you can leverage finances a lot more creatively than when you have a salary. Because when you have a salary, you're getting paid a paycheck, and even if you have your own sort of like life expenses that you need to take care of, that doesn't matter for the Federal Tax Bureau or whatever, for the IRS. Like they know how much you make, and based on how much you make, you're put into a bracket. Based on that bracket, you pay a certain amount of taxes and where you live. As a business owner, if I have different types of like business dinners and personal expenses. Like when you go have dinner with someone to network with them, because you're paid on salary, no one considers that a business dinner as if your company's not paying for it and you're just going to network with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, everybody I network with is a business opportunity. And there's a lot of creative ways in order to expense, things in my life. And so as a business owner, you're able to leverage finances a lot more effectively, to the point where like, getting, your take home being 60K on salary or 100K on salary versus 100K as a business owner, you're able to, you're able to walk away with more, and you're also able to like leverage that to grow your business essentially.
Love you
And grow your
that.
network and things like that. So that's another really important thing that people like, I don't think about, but it's a big part of business. It's a massive part of business.
Yeah. I think it's completely forgot about in the calculus. And I'm curious actually, just to really quickly ask, are you doing anything unique with your office space, with your claim towards office space?
I am.
Like in your living space? Yeah.
My apartment, part of my apartment is written off.
Mm-hmm.
My car is written off. My gas is written off. Everything, pretty much everything, food. You have to be strategic about it. I mean, I have like, I have an accountant and a bookkeeper, and, there's different people that I talk to on an advisory level that help with, sort of like financial structuring in business and with my businesses. But, I guess that's the other thing about having a business that is an agency at nature, is that agencies can do anything. They can help people with anything, and they can, it's a lot easier to justify things, justify expenses.
Completely.
Yeah. And when you are spending when you're like with a business too, the idea of reinvesting is like you're building so much equity into that business, because if you decide to take that money home, you're getting taxed on it. But if you put that money back into the business, you're just adding more value to the business. You're getting richer, even though you're not. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so like that's where it comes into play, and that's where getting creative with things like office space and whatnot actually makes a lot of sense. It makes more sense than taking it home.
Completely. It's the reinvestment of dividends, but in the entrepreneurial way. Yeah. I love it, man. I want to talk on two more points before we close out. Yeah. One is I really want you to just have a little bit of an open mic, and just anything that you kind of wish younger Sam knew. If you could shake younger Sam, I know that this is way too broad and way too philosophical, but if you could just shake younger Sam and just maybe give him a little piece of advice, I'm curious what it would be.
I think, honestly, I've had a lot of realizations recently on how to be a better leader, how to be a better business owner, and how to optimize in order to like be more successful. Right. So I think like the way I would say, like, I want to shake younger Sam to see something is like, I don't even see it as younger Sam like 3 years ago. I see it as like younger Sam like a few months ago, honestly, because one of the biggest things is like, you can't, Sam, do everything yourself. I think that one of the difficulties of being passionate about your business is that you want to make sure everything's taken care of. And you are so hyper fixated on things being done the right way and in exactly the right fashion, with exactly the right attention to detail, with exactly the right amount of X, Y, and Z, to the point where like you can't let go of that task. So like, I mean, a lot of like entrepreneurs and business owners talk to delegation, but like I realized things very recently. So that's why I was speaking to like Sam a few months ago, which is one of the most powerful things that I'm realizing, which I spoke on this earlier in the interview here, like, is the power of delegation. But beyond that, it's the power of delegation offshore, because you're able to leverage capital in a way where it goes way further. Because like when I was hiring my executive assistant, I went through 4 people, and they were great. They're great people. They just weren't the right fit for the role, or the role wasn't the right fit for them, or whatever. But all of those people lived here in the US. And so the baseline amount of money that you have to pay someone in the US in order for them to support themselves is much higher. But sometimes when you're dealing with thin margins, or a business that you have to reinvest all the money back into the business, where does the business model come into play, right? Like if you're making let's say $10,000 a month, but you're paying $20,000 on talent, it's an unsustainable business. Even if you have savings, you can't justify that.
Yep.
Unless of course, like you see a way for that for the return to come, like, in the short term. And so that's something that I have realized. Like when I was first hiring for an executive assistant role, I was so like focused on inside the US because I didn't know what was really out there on the offshore side. And I, deal with a business where like I need someone to be kind of like not just fluent in English, but not sound like they're from a foreign country. Because a lot of the people I deal with, it's all relationship based, and they don't want to feel like they're dealing with someone that's halfway across the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I've ultimately realized just how much potential there is in offshore delegation. Like my executive assistant lives in the Philippines, and they're absolutely incredible. They're fluent in English. They have 15 years of experience, and I pay less than $1,500 a month for them. And they're working full time. And so I think that like, if you're able to train that person, and let's say they have more years of experience than you in what you're looking for. I'm not operational. I'm not the type of person that's good at systems building and operations. But I found someone that for less than $1,500 a month, they changed my life when it comes to operations at scale. Because that's one of the biggest things I've had a difficulty with across, not even just within each business, but across businesses. It's like, how does Sam stay organized? How does Sam stay on top of things? How does Sam optimize the amount of value he's adding to his projects? And a lot of that just comes from lack of operations, lack of operational efficiency, lack of organization. And, not to like shit on myself, but it's like, this is one of the biggest realizations I've made recently. And if I were younger Sam, starting up my businesses, the first thing I would do would be to hire out like offshore, but work with, like for me, I'm working with an agency or a couple of agencies right now that like, they help me find talent. Like there's one of the agencies I'm speaking to right now helps build teams that can optimize your business. And so, that's, I think one of the biggest things for starting a business is like, you need like this sort of, you need like a team behind you. You need power in order to drive a business. But I think that like you can scale a team much more quickly to the point where, you're accelerating the growth of your business by hiring offshore and then mixing and matching the offshore talent with like onshore talent, with like talent that, is local. And so, that's, I think, one of the biggest things, that I've like come to realization about. And I wish that I took the leap of faith sooner about that. Yeah.
That's super tactical. I love that. To close this out, man, we've chatted about this once before, and I've added a little caveat to this question because I like to close every episode with this question, and I realized that 80% of people's initial answer to this question is going to be time. So I'm gonna unfortunately corner you and make you not answer with time.
Okay.
But what do you consider the ultimate scarce resource outside of time? But I'll give you a moment. And yeah, I think lately
I have my answer.
Okay. I won't need to act and procrastinate. Go for it.
Competent talent. I think honestly, that is one of the most scarce things to come across is competent talent that's willing to work day and night, work extremely hard, go above and beyond for the business. Like dedicated, dedicated, competent talent. I honestly, and this is not like to shit on humanity or anything like that. Like I am a very optimistic person and I believe that everybody has the opportunity to be something great. But there are a lot of people that I've worked with through business that are just simply incompetent. And there's also a lot of laziness. And I think even like I will take accountability for the fact that sometimes I am lazy. I would say I'm a competent person. I would say I'm above competent person, but I'm sometimes lazy and like it's annoying. And I know like one of my partner at Metronome sometimes gets really upset, like that I'm lazy, or like one of I'm not talking about time, but like one of the things that I have struggles with is time management, like getting everything done that I need to get done in a certain amount of time or being on time to things. Like one of my biggest weaknesses is being on time, which is such an important thing. I get it.
Yeah.
But one of my biggest difficulties is time management and ultimately being on time to things. And so like even my partner gets very frustrated with me. And I think that like, my point is that is just like, there is so much of this that like of like laziness or incompetency that like finding competent talent that believes in your vision. Like I think a lot of founders and a lot of business owners talk about everything is about who you hire. Like everything is about your team. If you have a strong team and you're able to empower people that are better than you at doing certain things to do those things within your business, you will 10x your business because it's like if you work with smart people and you put them in the right positions and you give them accountability, you provide them with incentives, you provide them with the resources that they need. You know what I mean? Then, and you provide them with like the flexibility within their workflow to go kill, then you will be much like your business, your business will be much, like that is the sort of, the wow factor of a business that allows for it to grow in a way where it beats the competition because your team is everything. And so, yeah, I would say talent is really, really hard to come by. And I've filtered through and I've gone through, like I said, 4 EAs. I've gone through, and I'm not saying that they were incompetent, but like, you know, I've gone through a lot of different talent, a lot of different people I've worked with, contractors, because, you know, and that's why it's also like businesses that have competent talent, they do everything to keep them. They build incentives and they provide equity packages and, you know, because the talent that is, you know, the talent that you bring in, if they're really effective for your business, you want to make sure that you're going to do everything you can to keep them, and to allow for them and their role to scale within your company and to make sure that they're kept happy and learning and not complacent. Because competent, smart talent, especially that talent that is dedicated and that is, you know, it truly believes in what you're building. You know, they're going to be the most important part of your business. So I think that's scarce, but also just extremely important as well, just in general for businesses. And it's something I'm still working on. Honestly, like transparency is everything in this. And especially for people listening and especially for people that want to be entrepreneurs, everything I'm talking about, I'm still working on to this day. Nothing is like, I'm coming from a perspective where I'm not working on it anymore. Right. Yeah. I'm still at very early stages of my companies and where I think they could go, especially with respect to where I think they can go. Yeah. And so, you know, I still haven't found a lot of, you know, talent that I could say will be long lasting within our businesses and within my businesses. And I'd say there are people within my businesses that I know will be around for a long time and I'll do everything to keep them. But I think that like, I'm still optimizing for this.
Makes so much sense. I'm really curious if there's any signals or triggers early on that now that you've realized that you need to develop a scent for the competent, talented people out there, if there's any early interaction type little, I don't know, idiosyncrasies or anything that
I think there's ways to prompt it. It's like, because everybody's going to, the sign is going to be different, but there's ways to prompt, like, to prompt a response, right? Like if you give them small tasks on a like much lower level, like lower leverage, you know, non-business threatening, right? Like you're kind of giving them like projects that don't pertain directly to I'll give you an example. I have somebody right now that, I will find out whether or not they're going to be the right fit for a specific role, but I've given them a task of building a deck of everything that Flair does in a comprehensive way. And I've provided them with all the resources they need: context, details, data points, photos and videos, like stats and metrics on different campaigns and case studies and, and et cetera. And so I've given them a task that like does not necessarily, like if they don't perform well, there's no client on the line, but I'll be able to learn through them completing that task how passionate they are about the business, because the work, it reflects in the work. You can't lie about passion, especially not long-term and especially not on a project like this. Right. And so you can't lie about passion. So that's one of the big things. And then the other thing is like, just like laziness, like them getting it done on time and them doing it very well. And then, and so kind of, you can judge like that. And then also just competency. Like, did they complete the task well? And are there things they can read through the lines about that they don't have to kind of like, sort of, because it's not about like, I think asking questions is really important. And I ask a lot of questions. I've done that my whole life, but I think just like, there is a level of like intuition and a level of like understanding off the bat that comes from competency that, I'm looking for that quality in this person. And so that's kind of across the board. I think there's ways to prompt it by giving tasks. And then that allows for you to kind of like better sniff out those sort of, qualities that are needed in instrumental talent to the business.
I love that. Yeah, makes so much sense. Sam, thank you so much for chatting with me tonight. This was wonderful. Learned so much from you, man.
Thank you so much, Cole. This was awesome. And it's cool because this is the most I've spoken about my businesses in a long time. So it's like, it's good to have these conversations. I'm able to kind of like dig into my brain and find these responses, and then they help me as well. It's like, cool. I'm listening to myself as well. And this is great. Good refreshers.
Verbal processing is the best. That's why I go to therapy.
And I think you ask amazing questions. So I appreciate you making me think.
Where should people find you?
LinkedIn, Instagram, I would say.
At Sam Freeman?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, it's just Sam Freeman. And then on Instagram, it's Sam. It's quite easy.
we got a 9-year-old email here.
Sam_.f. No, it's just like the underscore dot situation, but
perfect.
Sam_.f or sam@theflaircollective.com is my email if you want to email me, or LinkedIn is just Sam Freeman. That's where you can find me.
Thanks so much, Sam. If you made it to this outro, thank you so much for listening. Genuinely trying my best to get better at this and make it as educational and entertaining for you. So please let me know how I can improve. I freaking love feedback. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, @ColeHume. And I intend to post way more on my Substack, so if you're the cultivated type and like to read a little, be sure to check out Young, Smart, and Battling Broke there. Until next time, smile at strangers and trust your curiosity. Thank you for listening.